Hi, and welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Coming up, Montefiore Einstein exemplifies community support by partnering up with the Bronx Zoo for their Run for the Wild race. The Associate Vice President of Community Affairs for Montefiore Einstein speaks more on their effort to support the Bronx. Then warmer days are here, and that means everyone's least favorite insect, mosquitoes, have returned to bother us once more. We speak with a health reporter for Consumer Reports to learn how to keep them away. After that, the MOCEJ office has announced the release of NPCC's weather report. We sit down with the Deputy Executive Director of MOCEJ to learn what NYC is doing to protect us from the rise of extreme weather. And finally, a member from Good Shepherd Services and a member from New Settlement joins us in studio to speak about their fight to save educational programs in our schools. So stay tuned. All this and much more is headed your way because we're now officially open. Hello everyone, I'm Kim Alleyne, and today is Tuesday, May 21st. You're now watching Open, a program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. Montefiore Einstein partnered with the Wildlife Conservation Society to host the annual Run for the Wild event, a 3 to 5K run that not only aims to protect wildlife, but also serves as an inspiration for New Yorkers to head to the Bronx and get active. Associate Vice President of Community Affairs at Montefiore, Melissa Cebollero, joins me to discuss. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about the collaboration between Montefiore and the Bronx Zoo, and how did that collaboration begin?
Montefiore Einstein and the Wildlife Conservation Society are both anchor institutions in the borough of the Bronx with well over 100 years serving the population in the region. The Bronx Zoo kicked off their 125th anniversary with the Run for the Wild event, and Montefiore started in 1884 in Upper Manhattan. So we celebrate our 140th anniversary this year proudly, and moved up to the Bronx in 1912. So well over 100 years in the Bronx as our home base. I think just having that connection as anchor institutions, with one institution focused on human science, the other on animal sciences, it made sense to join efforts. And in fact, the two institutions have been collaborating in somewhat of an official capacity for well over 2 decades, dating back to the Michael Bloomberg administration.
Now, although these are, organizations in the Bronx that have been here for years, sometimes people from the Bronx may not know more about these organizations besides, what they provide. So can you tell us a little bit more about WCS's Run for the Wild, and why did Montefiore choose to support this movement for over a decade?
So Run for the Wild is one of the Wildlife Conservation Society's biggest fundraisers of the year. It's hosted at the Bronx Zoo, and it is an attempt to dedicate fundraising efforts to a specific species. So this year it focused on the snow leopard, an animal that is facing extinction and is really challenged in the moment. So all of the monies that were raised specifically for the 16th annual Run for the Wild would be dedicated to research and conservation efforts for that particular species.
Now, this year's race was extra special because, as you mentioned, the Bronx Zoo is celebrating its 125th anniversary. How was it being a part of this tremendous celebration?
I mean, it's a proud moment for Montefiore Einstein. We have a very active community engagement portfolio, which includes sponsorship and support of really strategic initiatives, events, and opportunities in the regions where we have a presence. Run for the Wild was a natural collaboration and partnership It is a family-friendly event that encourages fun, physical activity. Families were able to walk the 3K run or walk throughout the Bronx Zoo grounds with their children. Some were walking behind them, some were on scooters, some were in strollers. And then of course you have your avid runners, your more competitive runners that were there for the 5K run that kicked off early at 8 a.m. That Saturday morning. It just makes sense. It is something that celebrates an anchor institution in our borough. It is something that encourages family and community engagement. And then, of course, the physical activity component is something that we value in reminding our community members that you can get physical activity that's fun and free and family friendly.
Now, what impact have you seen the race have on the community in the Bronx?
You know, I think the race brings people together in a way that is unique for us at Montefiore. Since we are sponsors, we proudly put together a Montefiore team that participates in the run and the walk. And then, of course, we are really proud of the team that comes on site the day of the event and just engages with the close to 5,000 participants that come through the zoo that day and all of the community members that come to cheer their family members along.
Now, you talked about that on-site presence, which kind of shows, and it's very important that Montefiore, Montefiore's involvement went beyond just sponsorship. Can you talk a little bit more about having that presence in the community, and how did Montefiore's involvement further promote a sense of community?
So the Office of Community Affairs takes a great effort to make sure that when we are collaborating, when we become part of some sort of a community event or engagement or initiative, that we are injecting as much substance as possible and strategic substance. So wherever we have a presence, we really look at the social determinants of health that that particular event or engagement is addressing, and we do our best to connect the expertise and the resources that are available within our hospitals and our health system to that engagement and the target population. So for something like Run for the Wild, where we knew there would be families, there would be participants of all ages, and there would be probably some athletes, we wanted to have a presence that served all of that. So we were able to have our Burke Rehabilitation Hospital, a premier rehab facility for all types of injuries, any type of surgery that requires rehab post-op. Burke is located in White Plains, but it is a member of the Montefiore Einstein family. And so, given their expertise, it made a lot of sense to ask them to join us. They tabled, making sure people were aware of all of their incredible services, some that are preventative, and then, of course, some if you should find yourself in an unfortunate injury or post-surgery situation. We had a volunteer nurse from our Department of Cardiology that was there to speak and answer questions about hypertension. We understand that people who exert physical activity have to be aware of signs of an excessive heart rate or maybe some labored breathing. And so she was there to guide people, answer their questions, make sure that folks that are participating in physical activity are doing it in a safe way. And then we had our clinical trials office, and the leader there, Dr. Marla Keller, she wanted to have sort of a team building exercise, a community service exercise. And so she asked the members of her team to volunteer on site. They helped us distribute the handy dandy gym towels that we give out at Run for the Wild. As people approach us, they're usually pretty hot and perspiring. And we also had some beautiful branded reusable totes. inside of those totes were uh, beautiful pieces of literature about some of our more advanced uh, specialties that are available within the region. So that team came to help us and to be a really important part of our on-site presence. But for them, it was a team building exercise. It was a moment for the associates to come together outside of the work environment, do something that's meaningful, give back to their Montefiore Einstein community, and get to know each other in a different way as colleagues and associates.
Now, it's so amazing to hear about, the ways that you supported the community through this event. Can you detail some of Montefiore's upcoming plans to assist the Bronx community on their journey to health?
Well, we are proudly the top corporate sponsors of Bronx Week. And so we are in the middle of that 13-day celebration that the Office of the Bronx Borough President and the Tourism Council puts on every year. We just completed Health Day, is the signature event for Montefiore Einstein as part of Bronx Week. We were at the Northeast Bronx YMCA. Close to 2,000 community members came through on Saturday and were exposed to a myriad of services, community health education, physical activity, and then a really nice component that this year included was a partnership with the NYPD and their baby shower initiative, which focuses on maternal health. So there was an entire portion of that Health Day event that was solely dedicated to prenatal services, expectant moms, and early childhood health in the gym of the Northeast Bronx YMCA. So it was just a lovely way to celebrate the Bronx and highlight the health services and resources that are available here. We will do that again on Sunday, May 19th, at the grand finale of Bronx Week. There is a pride parade, a concert, and a health pavilion. So all of the health providers that support Bronx Week will be co-located on Mashalu Parkway. Will be offering skin cancer screenings free.
Yes. Well, I definitely, sorry to interrupt because we are, towards the end, but I want to thank you so much, for joining us and having this conversation. And we'll definitely direct people to where they can learn more about all that Montefiore is doing. So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
To keep up with all of Montefiore's efforts, please go to their website at montefiore.org. Don't go away. We'll be back with more Open after this.
I remember when the Bronx did not really have a media outlet properly representing the people of the Bronx.
BronxNet provides for the community by being a community where people can be empowered to share their voices.
We are in a really great place technologically. We've got all the resources that we need to be effective.
Whether it's through cameras, storytelling, editing, we have provided those services for 30 years.
BronxNet's mission is to be a voice for the community.
To educate, to inform, and to inspire.
And you can be a part of it. We've built studios for you.
Welcome back. As we prepare for the upcoming summer season, it's important to take precautions against pests like mosquitoes and ticks. Consumer Reports has conducted a study to determine the most effective repellents to keep these insects at bay. Their findings can help us make informed decisions to protect ourselves and our loved ones from bites and potential diseases. Health reporter for Consumer Reports, Kevin Loria, joins me to discuss. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
Now, aside from being a pest, what are some of the more serious health concerns of these mosquitoes and ticks?
Sure. So beyond the itchiness and annoyance, mosquito bites can actually spread serious illnesses, as can ticks. So one of the common ones spread by mosquitoes in the U.S. is West Nile virus. This typically, if people develop symptoms, it can cause flu-like symptoms, but in some cases it can be more serious. And then there's, a huge number of other illnesses out there spread by mosquitoes and ticks. So definitely a lot of stuff that's worth looking out for in these warmer months.
And can you talk about how often this affects Americans, especially in regard to mosquitoes and ticks? Because I think most people just view them as, just insects that are annoying, but there is something a little bit more in regard to that. So can you talk about how often it affects people?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we talk about mosquitoes, so an illness like West Nile will affect, a couple thousand people each year. There are rarer diseases spread by mosquitoes too, like Eastern equine encephalitis, which doesn't infect that many people, but can be very, very, very severe when it does. And then when we talk about mosquito-borne illnesses in the U.S., in some places like Florida and Texas, and especially in Puerto Rico, mosquitoes spread dengue and chikungunya, and these can be very, very serious infections. Last year, there was a CDC report that even documented a couple of locally acquired malaria cases in Florida, Texas, and one in Maryland. And then when we talk about ticks, we are talking about a large number of diseases that affect a lot of people. Lyme disease, by some estimates, can infect more than 400,000 people every year, and that's spread by black-legged ticks, which also spread illnesses like babesiosis and anaplasmosis. There are the spreading Lone Star ticks, which are becoming more common in a lot of places. These spread ehrlichiosis, and then they also spread this pretty scary allergy to red meat, which can cause an anaphylactic reaction. And then there are the larger dog ticks that people find, and these can spread Rocky Mountain spotted fever and other illnesses. So there's really a lot of stuff out there to be aware of.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, what are some ways we can reduce attracting mosquitoes, as well as, where are they usually located? I know we know it's outside, but, are there any particular locations where you tend to run into more mosquitoes than others?
Sure. So when you're outside, like you said, if you're outside on a warm day, it's pretty likely that you're going to encounter mosquitoes. You are going to find them in places near there is kind of standing water. That's where mosquitoes like to breed. You'll also find them in places where there's a little bit less airflow. So anywhere where there's, a lot of foliage, anywhere where it feels pretty kind of dank and humid, these are the sorts of places you're going to encounter mosquitoes. Ticks you're going to find in places where there's kind of tall grass, or where you have areas where people live that are close to forests, where you have kind of deer and mice running through. And so, kind of to avoid attracting these things in these places, there are a few things you can do. You can always wear long sleeves and pants. Closed-toed shoes can also help. Wouldn't want to wear anything that's too tight that a mosquito can bite through. There are some things like dark clothing or perfumes or aftershaves that might attract mosquitoes, so you might want to think about that when you're going out. And then, of course, you can always wear an effective insect repellent. That's one of the things that will definitely help keep these things away.
Yes, and we're definitely going to delve into that. One of the most popular ways to avoid mosquitoes and ticks is the use of a repellent. Can you detail CR's testing and methods for testing some of the best repellents?
Yeah, so this is actually a pretty cool thing that we do. So most of the testing that we do is done against mosquitoes. And so to do this, we have these test subjects, and what they do is they apply repellent to their arms, and then they wait 30 minutes, and then they actually take their arms and they stick them into this box that has 200 disease-free mosquitoes. And they hold their arm there for 5 minutes. They watch to try to count each landing, each probe, looking for a capillary, and each bite that occurs. After 5 minutes, they'll take their arm out of that box, put it into another box that has a different species of mosquito, hold it there for 5 minutes as well. So then they'll get up, they'll walk around for 10 minutes to kind of simulate a little sweating, a little real world exercise. In half an hour, they'll repeat that test with the two boxes. And then they'll keep on doing that every hour after that until either the repellent fails to protect or 8 hours have passed. Because after 8 hours, I think that you can say that you're definitely safe and protected. A repellent fails if a person gets 2 bites within one of those 5-minute time spans, or 1 bite in one box and then 1 bite in the next 5-minute section in the next box.
Now that's a really cool experiment, and it definitely takes a lot of brave people to do that.
Yes.
I'm curious to know. You mentioned that sometimes the mosquito will go onto the arm. What does a repellent actually do? Does it stop the mosquito from actually just coming near you at all, or does it just stop the bite?
So, I mean, it depends on how effective it is. I mean, ideally, it is going to kind of keep the mosquito from, it'll kind of prevent the mosquito from wanting to land there in the first place. It'll kind of send it away. In other cases, in a repellent that is wearing off or maybe less effective, maybe the mosquito will land and kind of, it'll feel some sort of distaste or something like that, and so it'll get away after that. But hopefully, it stops it from even, landing in the first place. But most important is if it prevents a bite.
Now, your research found that not all repellents are effective. Can you expand on that finding?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are obviously a ton of repellent products out there, and some of them are marketed as all natural or kind of not containing certain ingredients. But the fact of the matter is that when we look at repellents that don't contain kind of one of the main EPA registered ingredients that we look for, the most common one that people are probably aware of is DEET, but there are others out there that are effective. But when we look at some of the alternatives, a lot of these might offer some protection, but usually protection that won't necessarily last very long. So in some cases, some of these all natural products, they might last for, an hour or two, as opposed to the 4 to 6 hours that you might get from another product.
That leads to my next question. Are there any myths or just false methods about keeping mosquitoes away that have been trending? I know for myself, when I did this research, I would see that lavender is a good repellent. Have you found that to be true? And I know a lot of people are interested in that because they do look for more natural products.
Sure, and I get that. That makes sense. And I think that in a lot of cases, when we look at a lot of the alternatives that pop up and a lot of the ones that you see kind of people talking about, in some cases, it's just something that there's not a lot of research to support. And so, I wouldn't want to say like, oh, definitely doesn't work. But also, if it hasn't been tested, then I wouldn't want to tell somebody to do it. In some cases, let's say it's a repellent that has been tested and contains lavender, and maybe it's one of those ones that helps keep a mosquito away for an hour or so or something like that, but it might be the sort of product that requires a pretty frequent reapplication. You also see, I mean, people are interested in things like citronella candles and stuff like that. And in a lot of cases, there's just not a lot of evidence that these things actually can keep mosquitoes away, unfortunately.
Now, what are the active ingredients a consumer should look for?
So the main ones that we look for are DEET, oil of lemon eucalyptus, or OLE, picaridin, and IR3535. And so what we found in our tests is that most of the products that we recommend, that we say they do really well. So there are DEET sprays, wipes, and lotions that contain 25 to 30% DEET. Some of the ones that we've tested that contain 15% DEET also do very well. For the OLE, oil of lemon eucalyptus products, the ones that we found effective are sprays that contain 30% OLE. And then when we look at the picaridin products, the ones that we found that are effective are sprays. Most of them contain 20% picaridin. I think we do have one in our test that contains 10% picaridin, which has also repeatedly done very well.
Now, CR, or Consumer Reports, recommends using repellent as one part of the strategy toward protecting yourself from insects. And another thing that people should look out for is their backyard. What can people do to make sure that their backyard isn't infested with a bunch of mosquitoes and ticks?
Yeah, so one of the most important things that you can do always is you just want to make sure that there's not any standing water out there. And it's really surprising how little water there needs to be for mosquitoes to kind of have this effective breeding ground. So you want to, approximately once a week or so, you want to walk around the yard. You want to dump out anything that has collected water or rainfall or anything like that. So that might be a bird bath. It might be a flower pot that doesn't have anything in it. It might even be just like a tarp or something like that where some water has pooled. Like even that, you just want to make sure to flip it over, dump it out, because mosquitoes don't have a huge range. And so if you can keep the standing water away, and if there's not many mosquitoes breeding around you, you're going to really reduce the numbers out there. The other thing that you can do, because they like these dank kind of humid places, is if you can clear away foliage and debris and stuff like that, that's also going to help.
And how useful are electric methods for keeping insects away?
Right. So you can imagine that sound right there of like a bug zapper or something kind of buzzing away at night. And, I think that, if you've heard that, it sounds like it should be effective because you hear it going zzz, 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 as it is killing insects. But the thing is, what most research on these has shown is that it's typically not killing a lot of mosquitoes. These things do kill other beneficial insects, things that we do need in the environment, and they kind of make the environment outdoors actually a more pleasant, great place to be. And so most entomologists would tell you to stay away from the bug zappers and things like that that are out there. If you're looking for something like a mosquito trap, there are these things out there based on a CDC AGO trap, and these typically look like buckets that mosquitoes will fly into to try to breed in, but then they either can't get out or they get caught in some insecticide, and that works. The other electric thing that can work is just like a really good fan, because mosquitoes aren't great flyers, so if you have an oscillating fan, that will help keep them away.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, honestly, this is a really important segment that we're having because I know I can't stand mosquitoes, and so I'm taking it all in right now. So once again, I just want to thank you so much for kind of educating our community and what we could do to, have a fun and safe summer. So thank you.
For sure. Thank you, Kibin.
To learn more about this article or other articles written by the Consumer Reports team, please go to their website at cr.org or stay connected with them on social media at Consumer Reports. Stay tuned, we have more for you right after this.
Without BronxNet, I don't know how we'd be able to showcase the important and amazing talents that we have here at the Bronx. We've been able to feature lots of great artists, performers, people who deal with coffee and small entrepreneurship businesses, discuss controversial topics, and also be able to share the voice of residents that might not normally have access without a place like BronxNet.
Hey everyone, it's your girl Kat from the Kitty Rose Lifestyle, also from The Next Chapter, where we discuss shades of gray every week right here at BronxNet, Saturdays at 11 p.m. Wow, 30 years. 30 years of BronxNet public access television. I'm a girl from Brooklyn and came to the Bronx 25 years ago, started my journey on BronxNet on public access television in 2016, and BronxNet is where I got my start. BronxNet, I feel like, is a home away from home. They support all of my endeavors, and I wouldn't have been able to be on any of the other channels if it wasn't for the fundamentals that I learned right here at my start here at BronxNet. So I am so appreciative. My son says I should stop telling people I'm from Brooklyn because I've been here now, Bronx strong, for 22 years. So I'm so grateful, and I wish you much success in 30 years, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30 more, because public access is necessary so that people like myself can have a voice. Yes, BronxNet, it's your girl Kat from Kitty Rose. Check me out every Saturday at 11 p.m. right here, Channel 68, The Next Chapter, where we discuss shades of gray. Mwah.
Welcome back. The NYC Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice announced the release of the NPCC report. The report confirms that NYC will continue to experience extreme heat events, intense rainfall, and flooding due to climate change. It also highlights the equity implications of climate change for vulnerable communities. Deputy Executive Director for the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, Paul Lozito, joined me to discuss the report and how the city plans to address these concerns. Paul, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, can you provide an overview of the Mayor's Office, larger efforts to address climate change?
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. So the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice was formed in 2022. It consolidates the Offices of Resiliency and the Office of Sustainability. What's important about that is that our office is focused on reducing the impacts of our city on the environment, and so that's working with industry leaders, building owners to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and general impact on our environment, and also focus dually on the implications associated with climate change. So we have hazards ranging from extreme heat, torrential rain, coastal flooding, other impacts, and our office works with agency partners, experts throughout New York City, public and private partnerships to identify issues and how to resolve those issues on an ongoing basis.
Now, how did the NPCC's relationship with the mayor's office regarding this effort initially start?
So the NPCC is really cool. So there's an intergovernmental panel on climate change that's sponsored by the UN going back to about 1998. And New York City, wanting to be a vanguard, a model, a leader for the country, convened its own panel, the New York City Panel for Climate Change, NPCC. And we started that in 2009, and that was codified into law in 2012. And what the NPCC does is it takes experts, convenes them to identify what the world will be like in 2100, 2050, 2100 as it relates to risk from the kinds of hazards that I discussed previously.
Now, why was it important for the NPCC to explore how climate change specifically affects New York City?
Absolutely. If you think of our office as a bit of a research and a development office, they provide the key research, the key data we need to understand where we will be in 50 to 100 years. And so if you're looking to protect the city, you'll need time to adapt to what the future climate is going to be. And so they help us to do that. So if the rain is falling substantially in certain areas, they will help us to their report helps us to identify that, and then we work with city agency partners and other institutions to identify how we cope with torrential rain in a particular area. That's one example. Another example is addressing extreme heat, right? And so we now know, in consultation with the NPCC and from other scientists, that we are entering a humid subtropical climate, right? A climate that's more akin to cities in the South. And it's how do we cope with that future being hotter and wetter?
And I think this is so interesting because as New Yorkers, we kind of just live life day by day, and we don't, like, we notice the changes, but we don't often discuss it, or we'll just say, oh, today was really hot, but we don't think deeply about why this is happening. So I think this, this report was so important. Can you just tell us a little bit, about some of the key points in the report?
So hotter and wetter. So you'll know, everyday New Yorker will know from last year that I think it was about 70+% of the weekends were rainy. Yes. 2023 was the hottest year on record. January was the hottest January we've had. And so you're seeing less snow, you're seeing just a warmer environment, and you're seeing more extreme weather events. So you think of like last September, Tropical Storm Ophelia, Hurricane Ida, Superstorm Sandy's of the world, in addition to much hotter summers.
Now, what was the mayor's office initial response to the NPCC report regarding the pattern of NYC's extreme weather changes?
I think from the report, it's just a renewed sense of purpose. We revised the report. This is the 4th version of the report. And so when we get our revised numbers, what we do is we take that information and we try to take action. What we've learned from the report can seem scary to people, but our goal is to work with our city agency partners to make sure that New Yorkers have the best quality of life and the safest quality of life as it relates to climate change moving into the future. So it was more of a renewed sense of purpose. And a gratitude to the NPCC. These are volunteer scientists that help us.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Now, you mentioned that it can be scary, and I think that is like such a really important just thing to point out, because I think that a lot of people don't want to face, the effects of climate change or even acknowledge it because it is scary. In your work, how do you deal, or just how does the organization deal with kind of just grappling with that harsh reality that, our world is changing because of climate change?
I think the most important thing to do is knowledge is power, and communicating in a real and practical way. So instead of talking about climate change globally, talking to a community, I'm thinking of our Climate Strong Communities program. We go to a community, we say, these are the risks in your neighborhood. These are the things that we can explore to try to address those risks. Because addressing climate change can be as simple as planting a tree.
Now, I want to talk about the environmental justice part of everything. Now, low-income communities and communities of color are disproportionately impacted by environmental inequities. Can you detail some of the ways these communities are uniquely affected?
I'm happy you asked that question. Our office is the mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice intentionally focused on environmental justice and repairing past harms to communities that have been communities of color. And the way we try to target that is when we think about a climate risk or a climate hazard, we also overlay what communities have been historically impacted. So I'm thinking of, and we'll talk more about this, our Environmental Justice NYC report, which identified citywide what areas have been historically disadvantaged and how those communities have been adversely impacted by climate risk.
And I want to talk a little bit more about education because unfortunately the communities that are most affected don't always have the resources to understand what's even happening in their community, why they may be having higher rates of asthma, and so many other things. So how does the mayor's office kind of approach education in that aspect?
I completely agree. What we do, again, I think it comes down to the fundamentals of knowledge is power. I know we did just come out with our EJ NYC report that has a mapping tool component, so you can visualize where the hazards are, so you can ask better questions about why that's happening in a particular area.
Now, how are these concerns heightened by climate displacement risk? And for those who don't know, can you just explain what that is?
Climate displacement risk is you are if you live in an area where, say in the year 2100, that area more likely than not will not be safe for people to live in, right? And so then the issue at hand is, do you motivate people to move away from those areas, or how do you help those people cope with the climate risk, right? And the risk of displacement from where they are living. And when you have a historically marginalized community or underserved or under-researched community, when you move someone from that area to another area, you are reformatting the institutions and the resources they have available to them. And when you have less resources, then it's more difficult for you to move to another area.
And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation because I think it shows that climate change is affecting so much more than just our weather. It's affecting just the way, as you mentioned, the way people live. It's affecting generations of families because if you have to move and your entire family is from one area, I could just imagine the impact that could have on a generation of people. So I think it's so important that we're having this discussion. What can New Yorkers do to further support the city in this fight to protect our planet and our communities?
So civic engagement is core. Join your community board. You could be as young as 16. If you're a building owner, get flood insurance or call the New York City Accelerator. Think about ways that you can decarbonize your building, reduce your building's footprint. If you are someone just walking down the street and you see trash that's in a gutter, take the trash out of the gutter. That's the way the water leaves your community in a torrential rain event. Compost. Think about taking a bike versus driving, take the subway versus driving. Just think about everyday ways where when you're interacting with the environment, your impact can be lessened as you move through space.
Now, you mentioned something that I thought was interesting, and you said you could be as young as 16. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how, the mayor's office is getting younger people involved in this fight?
Absolutely. I think what we try to do is engage, and this was a function of our EJ. When we announced our EJ NYC report, we announced that at the Boys and Girls Club, right? Because we want young people to be educated about environmental justice and about climate change related issues, partially because those young people are at the forefront of addressing the change because they will be here in 2050 and 2100 to have to cope with the environment that we will leave behind.
And what do you hope, to see for the future of this fight? I know that it's been a very long one. I've been learning about this since I was in middle school. And I know that, as time goes on, more generations of children are going to be a part of this. What do you hope to see for the future of that?
What do I hope to see is I hope to see that we make more concerted efforts to use the information that we got from, say, the MPCC report to focus in on how to make meaningful change at the community level. So I think of it as, okay, you live in a certain area of the Bronx, you have an extreme heat issue. How do we help and organize around tree planting, or making sure that instead of having a paved space, opening up that space so maybe it's grassland so that the grass can absorb water and it's just a higher quality of life.
And how do we get people in these marginalized communities who are already facing so many other challenges, to be more involved? Because I think that sometimes when it's not an immediate impact, people tend to kind of push it towards the back. So how do we get people in those marginalized communities to care or be a little bit more present in this fight?
I appreciate your question. I think that the way we get people to be involved in the fight is we make it about them. We meet them where they are in their community and talk about real quality of life issues in the context of climate change.
Well, I think this is such, again, an important conversation. Every time we revisit this topic, I learn a little bit more. Example with the climate displacement risk, that was something that I didn't think about previously. And I think that these conversations are always peeling back new layers on how it's going to affect our community. So, I appreciate you taking the time to come here to the Bronx, one of the places that are, that is heavily affected by this and kind of educating our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
To keep up with the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, please go to the website at climate.cityofnewyork.us and follow them on social media at NYC Climate. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more Open after this.
Thank you, BronxNet. Congratulations on 30 years. What an amazing accomplishment. On behalf of myself, Alina Dow, and I represent the Dow Twins and the Dow Twins Show, who are young producers. They started, I think, when they were 11, and now they're 14. They started making 30-second little fun facts, and now they are doing 30-minute shows. And it goes to a testament of how much you guys do in the Bronx to make young people want to continue to be involved. I wish you 30 more amazing years and beyond. Thank you for what you do.
Only 57% of New York City high school students are college ready by their senior year. %5 of high school graduates either have no plans to attend college or are uncertain that they will ever attend. %34 of young adults don't go to college because they can't afford it. Discover what's possible. BronxNet's education programs, internships, and opportunities help engage and inspire Bronx youth and beyond to pursue their passions. Be a part of the BronxNet family. Whether you're interested in our shows, joining a class, or donating to support our mission, visit BronxNet.org to learn more.
The ability to have my show during this time is helpful because I can stay connected with my friends, still interview people, and share my content.
Welcome back. The Mayor's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget includes funding for education initiatives previously funded by expiring federal stimulus funds. However, many educational programs remain at risk of being cut. Director of Parent Action for New Settlement, Chauncy Young, and Vice President for Government and Community Relations at Good Shepherd Services, Minguez Garcia, joins me to discuss the programs. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Now, as I mentioned, so many educational programs are possibly, at risk of being cut. Can you talk about the Emergency Coalition to Save Education Programs and how did it begin?
Sure. So in July of 2023, many of our organizations were called together by Advocates for Children to really engage in an effort that would allow for all of us to advocate for all of the things that we had been advocating for separately under one umbrella, the Emergency Coalition to Save Education Programs. And really, it was a call to action to our elected officials to support the over $1 billion of education program that was going to be expiring at the end of June. Many of our organizations had different ideas of how this could be done. We also had different interests walking into it. For Good Shepherd, we had specific interests since we lead work around learning to work and student success centers and community schools and Summer Rising. And so we were like, those are the programs that we need to think about. And then we realized there's other things that are happening that we need to join forces and really focus on how do we do one voice, no negotiation, which my colleague Nikisha Francis would always tell us in those spaces. And Chauncy and I were in that meeting together when we decided that.
Now, how does the coalition hold elected leaders accountable for their role in preserving education?
Well, what we generally do is we're meeting with electeds, we're sharing with them our bottom line, our perspective, which is we're trying to restore all of the programs. You know, there's a commitment. We're seeing right now the mayor coming back and restoring part of these, cuts that were planned. But we know that they have the funding to restore all of the funding if they need. It's a question of priorities with the mayor, with city council, around where their priorities stand. And we feel like for our children, for our families, these programs are essential. Whether you're talking about 3K and pre-K for our youngest children, special education for our younger children, for mental health continuum, our community schools programs, support for immigrant families, student success centers. All these pieces are essential to creating a program, and especially as we're talking about for our neediest New York families, for families that don't have the money to go out and purchase an after-school programming, So this is really about an equity issue that we're trying to address. Every New Yorker deserves this. And so we're meeting with our council members, we're meeting with the mayor, with the mayor's administration, really pushing back and saying that they have the funding for this and they really should, do well for the city and do well for our children and for our families.
And we've been joined by members of the city council. We've been joined by parents. We've been joined by students. We had a five borough town halls. We've had a call to action for families and students. We have over 170 organizations that have also committed to push this same message. And we have also been briefing our elected officials both at the state level and at the city level about all these programs that Chauncy's talking about and what's at risk if those programs are not there for families.
Now, I definitely want to highlight some of the programs that were saved and some of them that were cut. I understand that $600 million was granted to sustain several education initiatives. Can you just tell us what were some of those programs that were luckily saved from the funding?
Sure. So we had 113 community schools that provide wraparound services for not only the young people that go to those schools, but the community at large. We had 450 social workers that were restored. We had 15 family workers. We had 60 psychologists. We had over 100 plus shelter-based coordinators that were really helping families navigate the shelter-based system. We had programs that were supporting older youth still get their high school diploma. Over 16,000 students are being supported through that. And then we had some partial restorations around that preschool special education. We had summarizing partial restorations there. And we also had partial restorations around 3K, right, to ensure that every third young child that is 3 years old has a seat in 12 of the 32 school districts across the city. And that really helped us to double the amount of seats for children in 3K. So there's more to be done, but we are excited and appreciate the efforts that the mayor has made to give us some relief early on as the budget season continues until June 30th.
Now, I know there were so many programs that were unfortunately left out. Can either one of you think of, maybe one that stuck out the most that you feel definitely deserved to get that funding?
It's hard to just say one,
Yeah.
honestly. I mean, when you're looking at it, I'll mention a couple. I'd say restorative justice, right? So really looking at alternatives to suspension and detention. That is a program that the previous mayor had supported, and that groups like ourselves, the New Salem Parent Action Committee, Dignity in School Coalition, and a lot of our youth organizations from across the city had advocated for, and had been successful. That program is currently on the cutting block. We saved it last year, because the mayor wanted to cancel it in his first year. So this is something we feel like we can save again, but also student success centers. New Settlement, has a student success center. Annie, you have a student success center. Like, these are essential, for students that have first time going to college, to have support from youth who have gone through that process. We want all of our children to be college ready, and that program we can't, say. And then I'd say college nurses. I mean, school nurses. There's so many of these programs really that it's hard to just choose one. That's why I just say, we want nurses, right? We need mental health support from the mental health continuum. There's a mental health crisis in this city. That's why we're part of the Healing Center Schools Working Group, right? Really trying to work on that support. All of these programs, will have an impact. Schools don't have the funding to make up these situations unless you live on the Upper East Side or Upper West Side, and you can have $1 million parent association that can bring in that nurse or that special program. We're talking about all New Yorkers deserve these programs.
And, I want to talk about that. I didn't, just upon getting ready for this segment and learning more, I didn't realize how many programs were in the city and were needed to kind of help support, education within our community. How will the lack of funding impact schools and their students?
So we always uplift this, that these were services and supports that were needed before COVID.
Yes.
And then COVID really exacerbated the conditions that families were experiencing. And when this money came to the city, we knew exactly what was needed, because we knew that before COVID, these were things. Dyslexia learning. We know that there's young people in our school systems that have dyslexia. This should not have been a temporary fix. This should be a permanent program that is supporting children. Immigrant translation and outreach. We know that we have, and even with the newcomers now, we know that we've had that need there. And now the newcomers have exacerbated what has been already exacerbated. And we need to make sure that families get the supports that they need in their languages, so that they're not missing out on important information for their children. And so what we know is we need to make these partial restorations, full restorations, and we need the rest of this list, about $286 million worth of it, permanent. We should not be funding it for 1 year. We should be funding it baseline. That means it's in the budget and we don't have to advocate. That way, we could be thinking about what do families need in the moment, and not just advocating for what we need, the bare basics of what we need. And what we learned during COVID is we have a lot of need, and the city needs to really think about, how do we invest our money? Budgets are moral documents, and we need that.
Now, can you talk about the rally? I understand a rally was held. What was the overall mission for that, and what did you hope to accomplish?
We were trying to highlight all the programs that have been left off of this budget, right? What are the things that are necessary for an overall complete supportive education experience for students and for families? As Annie was just mentioning, how is it that we might not have the supports for our new families coming into the city? New York City has always been an immigrant city. It's something we should embrace, support, and those languages are changing, and having support for interpretation is there, having the funds for, supporting for mental health, for supporting for college preparation, the fact that we don't have nurses, all these issues need to be brought to the table so that, elected officials in the mayor's office is aware of what is on the table. When people hear about all the programs that are being cut, that makes folks aware of why people are not happy with the situation with the budget. As Annie said, it's a moral document, and this budget right now is hurting our families and children, and that shouldn't happen.
And we know we only have a few more weeks, less than a month, a month and a half, to really influence the city budget process. So we know that the council and the mayor negotiate a budget, and they have to pass it by June 30th. And so this rally was really to influence that process. The city council was hosting their education hearing on that day. And so it was about how do we influence and raise up, like Chauncy mentioned, all of those programs that were left out, and put faces behind and stories behind how this is going to impact the communities and the individuals if those supports are not there.
Now, what are some methods parents and those in school communities can use to aid in this fight and the effort toward protecting education in New York City?
Well, I think that, one of the things we are trying to do is really show that parents and students have the right to organize, for their rights. I mean, the basis of the Parent Action Committee, we're almost 30 years, not quite yet there, but we're a parent-led organization that's been organizing for change, organizing for equity in the South Bronx, and now moving across the city with a lot of different citywide and statewide coalitions that we're a part of. But there are youth organizing groups that we work in partnership. And the truth is that, we are showing that, parents and students should be active citizens in this city. We are fighting because, unfortunately, nothing comes in this city without people advocating for it, for people fighting for it. Parents and students might not have millions and billions of dollars to influence our electeds like some of our partners here in this city do, but what we do have is we have our voice. And so, parents and students have stood up this whole year advocating, and we will continue to advocate for a just, city budget that supports families, students, and communities that we live in. And that's exactly what we're going to continue doing, is continue to organize and show our electeds that, our voices matter, our communities matter.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for joining me and, having this discussion on what we can do to save and protect education in New York City. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
To learn more about the Emergency Coalition to Save Education program, please go to the website on your screen below. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the Recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at BronxNet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Hemick on Wednesday and with Rena Valentine on Friday. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and your safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.